Welcome to Back of Box, the series that explores the question, is the recipe on the back of the box or the bag really the best thing you can make with that ingredient? Let's see. In this, our premiere episode of Back of Box or Bag, we are ironically using a bag. Is that ironic, or is it just not back of box? And specifically, we're going to be using an ingredient I have had my eye on for a while, and I purchased it at the King Arthur baking store because I happen to be picking up cake flour with gluten for my, I was about to say spring roll class, Swiss roll class that's coming up this weekend at my baking school.
Let's do a spring roll class.
Let's do a spring roll class. I can't even speak. Any hootenanny saw this, thought, that is intriguing. I have heard tell of this flour that is made with wheat starch, but not the wheat glutens. Wheat gluten, or protein in the flour before it hits water, and wheat starch are two different things. The wheat starch helps produce structure. It starts to kind of gain volume and also helps with staling or lack thereof. I think it'll also help with flavor or flavor. The other ingredients in this are, aside from gluten-free wheat starch, cornstarch, cellulose and psyllium fiber blend, which is good for the belly, sorghum flour, which I'm not a huge fan of taste-wise, but it's down there in the list, pea flour, a protein, xanthan gum, a binder. So you'll find xanthan gum in all kinds of gluten-free flour mixes, including King Arthur's Measure for Measure, and then enzymes, just enzymes. They don't give their names. Unsung heroes of the flour. And specifically, the recipe that is on back of bag is gluten-free Dutch oven artisan bread. So that means, number one, you need a Dutch oven, which I grab. Grab that Dutch oven. Ding! Tick it off your list. You'll need, and this recipe is in two parts. This is why I tell everyone, before you start the recipe, make anything, read it not once but twice, because in this case, there is a starter involved. And a starter involves hours, nay, day of your time. So if you think you're just gonna jump into a recipe like this and make the whole thing in one fell swoop, you would be surprised and disappointed. So you'll need, in two parts, starter. The starter requires a 3/4 cup or 170 grams lukewarm water, that's 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a 1/4 teaspoon active dry or instant yeast, 3/4 cup or 90 grams King Arthur gluten-free bread flour. For the dough, all the starter. And then 3/4 cups or 170 grams lukewarm water, that's 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a 1/2 teaspoon of active dry or instant yeast, 2 teaspoons granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon salt, and 1 3/4 cups or 210 grams King Arthur gluten-free bread flour. 90 degrees? 90 degrees.
He was 70.
He was 70 degrees.
Frank Sinkowitz, the 1942 Heisman Trophy winner from Georgia, died early today at his Athens home. He was 70 degrees.
So 90 grams, not degrees. Dribble. 173, I'm not mad. So I'm just gonna stir this up. It says some lumps are okay. I'm persnickety, so I think I would very much like to get as many of the lumps out as I can. If you want to know what the difference between letting this ride for 2 hours versus 24 hours, it will be flavor. So that yeast, as it's sitting around in the starter, is starting to num, starting to eat up and kind of rise a little, of course, because that's what yeast does, but it's also producing flavor. So in this case, it's going to be eating the sugars that are in that wheat starch. And then it will taste more and more, almost like yeasty and sourdoughy in the end product, even though this is not a sourdough. But in the end, a starter is just a mixture of flour, water, and a little bit of yeast to get it going and to provide flavor, and then you will add it to the resulting dough. And that should be covered, otherwise it will produce a crust. And then you're going to put it in a warm area, not too warm, no higher than that 72 degrees.
And a correction, Frank Sienkiewicz, who died early today at his home in Athens, was 70 degrees. Okay?
I want you to see the difference. It's very yeasty. So let's make sure that all the dry stuff is combined. Ooh, I'm liking this. Mama! Add that lukewarm water, and I'm going to put this in here. It's already pretty. Do I smell the sorghum? I am just so not a fan of sorghum. Hopefully I like this. It's one of the last ingredients. It's okay. I think I also smell that pea protein. If you ever make those protein shakes, sometimes I use pea protein. It's a weird smell. Anyway, let's let this rest for 20 minutes and then see what we do next on the back of the bag. 20 minutes have passed. It's time to go on to the next step. I'm just going to do this a couple more times, as I would with a gluten-full dough. So I'm going to make for darn sure that this is covered and in a warmer area so that it does get puffy. See you then, 40 minutes. So my next job is to prepare it for its shaping. So my oven is preheated. I will put the Dutch oven in there. And as for the dough, knead 5 to 6 times, then loosely shape into a round. So it's 1, 2, 3. So that is now done. I'm going to put it seam side up. There's not much of a seam. This down. And now I'm going to cover this. And we're going to proof it for 40 minutes again while we are preheating the oven. The two things should happen at the same time. So a little over 40 minutes have elapsed. It says here 30 to 45 minutes or until puffy. It is puffier. I noticed it. What it doesn't have is that distinctive jiggle that you will usually have in a yeasted product that has gluten in it. I mean, just a little. I'm not going to touch it too aggressively because right now, everything that I do with this dough, I want to handle it with kid gloves because it has all that expansion that I want to hold there until it hits the oven. So now I'm going to flip it. It says here, flip it out onto the parchment. Now my parchment, I'm going to center here, gently drop onto. I felt something happen, so I'm going to lift this. I'm going to lift this very slowly because what can happen? Oh, it's fine. Never mind. What can happen is sometimes that fabric part of it can stick to the bread. I have lambs. These are the lambs I use. A lamb is the thing that you use to cut or score the bread. L-A-M-E, but pronounced like bah. These are the ones that I like. I always have tons of these handy. And I will do a box score. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And scoring is important because as the dough rises, it will often split of its own accord in places that you haven't asked it to if you don't score it. By scoring it, you're saying, if you're going to expand, this is please where you're going to expand. And now I'm going to convey this, please don't break, into the oven. I'm going to put those right there. Remember, the lid is hot. And it says to bake, I've got to be fast, 40 minutes with the lid on, uncover, and then continue baking for 20 to 30 minutes. Let's do this. 40 minutes, lid on. You can see kind of this anemic top, zero expansion, and just, this looks terrible. I really do wonder whether I need to adjust this a lot lower in temperature. So I'm willing to try this again. I'm not blaming the flour. We did the technique as described in the recipe, but it could very well be that my oven is a little too aggressive and it needs something a little gentler to allow it to expand. It's still warm, but I'm gonna cut into this to see the crumb. This is a tight crumb, but I mean, it's not terrible. I also shouldn't be cutting when it's hot, but to be continued. Back of bag, gluten-free bread, part 2, electric boogaloo. We're gonna do everything the same as far as ingredient, weight, and measures are concerned. However, the changes that I'm going to be making are to kind of identify what went wrong. And that was, I think, room temperature here. Vermont, we are having a snowstorm, cold. When I did it the first time, also cold. The second thing is I'm going to address the oven temperature. Clearly mine was too high. And I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Ovens are big fat liars. So if you know your oven, if you know that putting it at 450 is going to scorch that bread, change it accordingly. Our starter is looking good as before, bumbly rumbly. I've let this go, as they indicated, almost 24 hours. Smells yeasty, great. 2 teaspoons sugar, 1 teaspoon fine sea salt going in, 210 grams of the gluten-free bread flour. Now I'm going to add the ½ teaspoon yeast with a starter. We started with a 1/4 teaspoon, now we're adding a ½ teaspoon. Instant yeast that can be added straight to the dry ingredients. And then we're gonna add the warm water, 170 grams, going straight in. Beep. It's 169, so close. They indicated that if you're doing this by hand, some lumps are okay. Nice. Boop. Our 20 minutes are up. Boy, this is just sticky, and probably I don't have to press as hard as I am, and I've already done it more than 6 times, but it's looking a little smoother. And now the instruction is to put it into the bowl and cover it again for 40 minutes, or, drum roll please, until it's puffy. Make sure you start with that room temperature water, but also keep in mind the temperature of your room. Because it is winter, when I made this the first time, I stuck to the numbers on the bag, but they gave me that second indication, or until puffy. I'm going to look for something more than just time, right? I'm going to look for some puffy. So let's look for some puffy. 40 minutes or more, we shall see. I will tell you. I'll see you then. We've got puffy. It's been an hour, and I also found a slightly warmer area of the house than I had this in before for the first go around. I also took a picture of what it looked like before and after. So after an hour, it was looking as if it had filled the complete bottom and had risen and gotten puffy. So it's great to have something like this, a picture of the before, so you can see if indeed it has changed from 40 minutes to an hour ago. Because this is sticky. So off to the side, I also have some water. Because this is sticky, this is what I would do with a regular old boule. This will help your fingers from sticking much better. There isn't a little bit of that inflation still present in there. I'm going to create a little dumpling here, close the seams, and they said a rough ball, so this is looking rough. So looking craggy and shaggy, but I did what they said. I'm going to put it seam side up into the board form. I'm going to take a picture again of what this looks like, and I take 2 pictures. And I take one from the side to get a sense of how high it has risen. There we go. Cover. Find a warmer place in your home, and then up to 30 to 40 minutes, they say. Let's see what it says. Allow to rest 30 to 45 minutes or until puffy. Again, it's cold. I think it'll take longer than 45 minutes, but we shall see. I have my pictures to indicate what puffy will be. Let's see. It's been 1 hour. I believe we have achieved puffy. I gave it an hour, and I'm looking at the pictures, and comparatively, puffy. It has arisen. I'm happy. It looks better than it did before. So I'm going to transfer it to my handy dandy silicone instead of parchment. You can use both. Gentle, gentle. Ah, it's sticking ever so slightly. Ah. And now I'm going to transfer it after I score it. So same way, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Into the preheated Dutch oven, lid on top. In we go. It recommends 40 minutes and then take the lid off, and then 20 minutes more. We'll see it when it's out. I have made the recipe on the back of King Arthur Baking Company's gluten-free bread flour, not 1, not 2, but 3 times, with different results for each one. The first time, my oven was simply too hot. It's a commercial oven, and the recipe on the back says 450. I had it at 450, and it was charred. Therefore, I turned my oven down 25 degrees for the next loaves that I made, because it's the same thing you would do in a home oven. If you have convection, if you want to do conventional degrees, you turn it down 25 degrees. That's exactly what I did. And that worked perfectly. The next thing I did is I made 1 loaf, and I used the minimum amount of time recommended on the back of the bag. The second loaf, I did maximum. This loaf you can see is a little springier. This one is more like a pancake. But I would like to cut into them to see how they look, and then I'm going to put them in my gob to see how they taste. Feels good. Crispier. Sounds good. That's a nice crumb. That does not look dissimilar to what is represented on the bag. And it smells mighty nice. Oh! Ooh, that feels good. This crumb is a little more open. I mean, not crazy open. It's not like this is a gluten-full bowl where it can literally, that gluten will hold those holes open because of the structure and the extensibility that's available when you use gluten-full flour. But I mean, again, not dissimilar to what's on the bag. Ooh. They smell very sweet. This one has more aroma. I wonder. This one I allowed to pre-ferment for 24 hours total, and then I let them both get puffy, but this one almost doubly so. I think I might have let this one go too far, but I want to taste them to see what the difference is. And I think, personally, the pre-ferment is going to make a difference. And that's that first starter that you make before you make the dough itself. So I smell it, but it's not crazy. Not a ton of flavor. The crust is meh. I mean, it would do. This I can definitely smell more. The crust feels better as I tear it open. There is more flavor in this pre-ferment. That's 24 hours. That's flavor building and building and building. So I think what I've learned here, that texture-wise, it's lovely. It doesn't have that full glassy texture that you get from a very open-hold boule that is made with gluten-full flour, but it is definitely more-ish. You just want to keep eating it and slathering it with butter. This one definitely has the flavor that I'm looking for. Not exactly like a glutenful bread, but something that is not dissimilar. The texture of the crust is lovely. I think that the structure maybe continued to grow as it was sitting, but I think there's something in the middle here where I don't let it go as long so that it can be a little perkier, but I let that pre-ferment go to get maximum flavor. Would I recommend King Arthur Baking Company's gluten-free bread flour? I think I would. I think if you're gluten-free, if you're celiac, this is definitely worth trying because the crumb alone is worth it. I have had many gluten-free breads that are chalky or gritty, that just don't have that lovely texture that you're longing for. Both the crust and the interior crumb kind of give themselves a little bit of that gluten feeling that you're probably missing when you're making gluten-free stuff. So worth a try, worth playing with. Just know your oven, know the temperature of your room, know that sometimes you're going to have to let it develop a little longer because it's cold, and then sometimes you're going to have to take a little less time because it's hot in the room, just like any other yeasted product. But is it worth it? I think it is, and I would love to continue playing with it. So that, my friends, was Back of the Bag with King Arthur Baking Company's gluten-free bread flour. I think I'm going to make a sandwich. Want a sandwich?
Yes, please.
Let's have a sandwich. If you're interested in more in-depth classes, both in person and online, visit sugargliderkitchen.com. Hey, don't forget to punch down those like and subscribe buttons.